The 16th of March, 1944. The air inside the Naval Conference Room in Kiel is heavy with the smell of stale tobacco and damp wool. Outside these concrete walls, the Third Reich is crumbling under the weight of Allied bombing raids. Inside the room, Vice Admiral Hellmuth Heye is not looking at a map of the collapsing front lines. Vice Admiral Hellmuth Heye is staring intensely at a biological logistics report. The Vice Admiral holds a fountain pen hovering over a document marked Top Secret. The document does not request more steel for the shipyards. The document does not request more fuel for the tanks. The document requests a chemical method to delete the human need for sleep. Vice Admiral Heye knows the new generation of German equipment has surpassed the biological limits of the operators. The machines can fight for 4 days. The soldiers can only fight for 1. This biological gap is unacceptable to the German High Command. With a single sharp stroke of the pen, Hellmuth Heye authorizes the creation of a pharmacological monster. This is not a story about recreational drug abuse. This is a story about a desperate engineering attempt to redesign the human nervous system because the German war machine had finally run out of soldiers. The story of DIX contains a final, bitter irony. The man who authorized the project, Vice Admiral Hellmuth Heye, did not face execution for these experiments. Vice Admiral Heye survived the war to become a successful politician and a military advisor to the new German government. The victims of the Schuhläufer-Kommando were largely forgotten by history. However, the dark science of DIX did not vanish. The desire to eliminate sleep remains a holy grail for modern military researchers. Air forces and special operations units around the world still study stimulants to extend human endurance. The ghost of the DIX cocktail lives on in every attempt to turn a soldier into a machine. The experiment teaches a permanent lesson. Science can build faster jets and stronger tanks. Science cannot redesign the human soul without destroying the human being. The strategic ambition of Project DIX ended in total failure. The Nazi leadership believed that willpower and chemistry could overcome the material superiority of the Allies. This belief was a delusion. The drug DIX proved that the human body has a hard biological limit. Engineers can overload an engine for a short burst of speed, but the engine will eventually explode. The same principle applies to the human nervous system. DIX did not produce super soldiers capable of turning the tide of the war. DIX produced broken men who died in the freezing waters of the North Sea or on the forced marches of the concentration camps. The miracle pill was just another empty promise from a regime that had lost touch with reality. The legacy of DIX stands as proof that logistics and industrial capacity decide wars, not magic potions. By late 1944, the medical officers of the Wehrmacht began to panic. The reports of addiction, heart failure, and psychotic breaks among the special units could no longer be ignored. The original plan to distribute DIX to the entire German army was quietly shelved. This decision was not a moral awakening. This decision was a calculation of utility. The doctors realized that a soldier who fights for 3 days on DIX requires a recovery period of a week or more. The downtime exceeded the uptime. However, the cancellation of the official project did not stop the chemical consumption on the front lines. The supply chains were broken. The discipline was gone. German soldiers, desperate to survive the relentless Soviet advance, created impromptu mixtures of Pervitin and alcohol. The official miracle drug DIX never saw mass production, but the philosophy behind DIX had already infected the ranks. The German army spent the final months of the war in a haze of stimulants, trying to delay the inevitable collapse with chemistry when strategy had failed. The transition of DIX from the concentration camp track to the Atlantic Ocean revealed the difference between a controlled experiment and the chaos of war. The German Navy issued limited supplies of DIX to the crews of the Seehund miniature submarines and the Neger human torpedoes. the tactical results were disastrous. The chemical cocktail kept the eyes of the operators open, but the chemical cocktail destroyed the judgment of the operators. Reports from surviving crews describe a phenomenon of total mental dissociation. After 48 hours on DIX, the young sailors did not feel like soldiers. The sailors felt like ghosts, trapped in a steel tube. The methamphetamine induced severe paranoia. The cocaine induced a false sense of invincibility. Seehund pilots attacked imaginary destroyers formed by the waves. Navigators stared at the compass until the numbers lost all meaning. The drug removed the biological safety switch of sleep, but the drug also removed the tactical awareness required to survive. The German High Command had created a weapon that could stay awake for 4 days, but this weapon was too psychotic to follow orders. The tragedy was not just the military failure. The tragedy was the permanent neurological damage inflicted on teenage sailors who were already fighting a lost war. Before the German Navy could deploy DIX to the front lines, the drug required calibration. The German leadership did not test the drug on volunteers. The German leadership tested the drug on the inmates of the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. This specific testing group was known as the Schuhläufer-Kommando, or the shoe walking unit. The test protocols were brutal in simplicity. The camp guards forced the emaciated prisoners to swallow the DIX pills. The guards then strapped backpacks weighing 20 kilograms onto the spines of the prisoners. The test subjects were ordered to march around a semicircular track of different surfaces: concrete, sand, and gravel. The results defied medical logic. Under the influence of DIX, the starving prisoners did not just walk. The prisoners marched. The prisoners marched for 24 hours without stopping. Some subjects continued for 90 kilometers without a break. Reports from the camp describe a horrific scene where prisoners sang songs and whistled while the feet of the prisoners were blistered and bleeding raw inside the boots. The chemical override was successful. The brain refused to acknowledge the destruction of the body. However, the observers noted a critical flaw. The drug did not create energy. The drug merely stole energy from the future reserves of the body, leaving the subjects in a state of catastrophic metabolic collapse once the chemicals wore off. The task of overcoming human biology fell to Professor Gerhard Orzechowski, the head pharmacologist at the University of Kiel. Professor Orzechowski did not approach this assignment as a medical doctor treating patients. Professor Orzechowski approached the assignment as an engineer tuning an engine. The result was a compound code named DIX. To the naked eye, DIX appeared to be a simple, innocuous tablet. However, a chemical analysis reveals a terrifying synergy designed to hijack the central nervous system. The formula contained 5 milligrams of cocaine. The cocaine provided immediate euphoria and eliminated the sensation of hunger. The formula contained 3 milligrams of Pervitin, also known as methamphetamine. The methamphetamine forced the brain into a state of hyper-alertness. Finally, the formula contained 5 milligrams of Eukodal, a morphine-based painkiller. The Eukodal was the masterstroke. The Eukodal numbed the muscle pain that would inevitably result from days of continuous exertion. This triad of drugs created a specific pharmacological effect. The cocaine and methamphetamine pressed the accelerator of the human body to the floor, while the Eukodal cut the brake lines. The soldier taking DIX would not just be awake. The soldier would be incapable of feeling the warning signals of exhaustion. To understand why the German Navy turned to a cocktail of hard narcotics, one must analyze the engineering specifications of 1944. German engineers had produced the Seehund type XXVII, a 2-man midget submarine designed to disrupt Allied supply lines. The Seehund was a marvel of technical desperation. This vessel possessed a range of 300 kilometers. The diesel engine was relentless. The electric batteries were efficient enough for submerged attacks lasting days. The steel hull did not feel fatigue. However, the organic component inside the hull was defective. The human pilot was a biological failure in the eyes of the Naval High Command. The environment inside a Seehund was a nightmare of claustrophobia and toxicity. Carbon dioxide levels rose constantly. The temperature fluctuated between freezing cold and engine room heat. In these conditions, a human pilot began to lose cognitive function after 12 hours. After 24 hours, hallucinations began. After 48 hours, the pilot became comatose. The machine was ready to fight for 96 hours, but the operator broke down after 20. This was a catastrophic asymmetry of logistics. The Nazi leadership looked at this problem and decided that if the machine could not be made more human, the human must be made more like a machine. The solution was not better training. The solution was chemistry.